Anyway, so yeah, the first pick I would uh, say is probably Ved Buens Ende, Written in Water. I know Abhishek particularly was waiting for it,
Whoa,
and
I
rest
love
of
that album, man.
most,
Now you're
yeah,
talking my
killer,
stuff.
killer. So actually, what happened is when I was asked to pick up top three albums, I figured out most of these albums which I wanted to pick was already being taken by others. So I had to again, choose an album which hasn't been taken, and I feel this is one of those albums that is kind of underrated. Not exactly underrated in the right circles, but then the kind of finesse, the kind of musicianship these guys have, it's on par with, I would say, dare I say, it's on par with King Crimson.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. When it comes to songwriting.
Yes, yes. So yeah, this album, I mean, when it came out in 1995, it's a for that time I feel it's a very visionary album. You could say it's a sort of like a architectural marvel of sound, you could say, or any for lack of better vocabulary, put all grand words that you have in your vocabulary to it. Yeah, and sound-wise, as all of us have heard this band, sound-wise, it's a very proggy album. It is considered black metal, but technically, many would say it's not a black metal album. But then the die-hard fans would say it's a black metal album. I personally think it is definitely a black metal album because though it doesn't have the screams like a traditional black metal album or anything like that, not those frequently, not in those scale and stuff like that. It has a lot of clean vocals, but the eeriness that this particular music gives you out, the again, this is the first point. Second point being again the point which we had already discussed about pushing boundaries. This is one of the albums that really does push the boundaries because if you think about it, in those times during the mid 1990s, Norway was the ground zero for black metal's all notorious activities. It was black metal's most notorious era was in during the mid 1990s in Norway. Mostly it was all about anti-Christianity, church burnings, murder, then theological differences and stuff like that. You know, it's interesting to understand that some band came, they were like, okay, what after the the fire dies down? What after the screams come down? What after that? It's exactly something like Abhishek, I think, was mentioning with regards to Abigail, or even Telal Siva was saying. Like after a certain point, you must think, what now? Because it has been done and dusted. There is no, fresh creative angle to it. What now? And Ved Buens Ende, being from Norway, did exactly that. When everybody was going after, extremity, more brutality, they did something totally different. And what's interesting is that particular album also has Vicotnik from our another beloved band, Dodhem's. Yes, and in fact, if I'm not wrong, Vicotnik was the one who did whatever screams and whatever growl parts were there in that particular album. I think it was Vicotnik only. Yeah, and yeah, it's a pretty boundary pushing prog album. Uh, I mean, if you think musically, if you talk about it, let's talk. If you talk about the guitars, again, I'll be a bit biased since I'm a guitarist myself. So if when I listen to Ved Buens Ende, the guitar parts particularly, they are not particular riffs. I consider them as textures, like guitar textures, not guitar riffs. There's no definitive riff like okay, this is the phrase, such a cool killer riff, but it's all those textures which complements with other instruments and collectively it dishes out something so unique, so eerie that and so beautiful at the same time that generally I sometimes feel it's very underrated because as I mentioned earlier, I almost feel like this is a certain combination that you could say between King Diamond and if any extreme metal band you have to take, let's say probably Gehenna, something of those style. I think this is a hybrid between Robert's style of playing in King Crimson and Gehenna's style of intricate parts and stuff like that. And musically also, if you see, there are rhythms there. There are, if you understand the term kilter, so kilter is basically has to do with the harmony, the note being on the right note and stuff like that. There are a lot of parts in that album which are off kilter, which you wouldn't expect from such calculated songwriting uh, albums like from King Crimson or Camel or Genesis and stuff like that. These guys did almost the same thing, but in a more evil, abrasive way, and it was more raw. There are certain parts it's not even on metronome, I could say, but still at the same time it's so very calculated, so very beautifully, crafted music, I would say. Plus, another thing would be Czral, yes, the guy behind the band. Czral, I think that is how we pronounce Karl or Czral. He's also associated with bands like Virus and Oranoir and one more band I forgot. Again, a genius musician. So his vocals, I think this is one of the most eeriest clean vocals I have heard. Like when you listen to the entire album, you almost feel like you are. I like to take it in a very, cinematic way, if that's the right word. I like to think of myself in certain situations listening to this music. I mean, that particular music, where it's taking you in what sort of situation, how is it transcending. So for me, this album is transcending in a way that it sort of takes me into a place which is like the ruins of old churches, kingdoms, and stuff like that. You're walking through them and you are listening to this classic eerie music, and somebody is singing, which sounds like a, some baritone singer is singing in a post-apocalyptic jazz lounge or something like that. I mean, a lot of different things, a lot of fresh things which I hadn't heard before. And it's been odd 15, 20 years of listening to music, various types of music, not only black metal. I would admit that there was a point which came around 2017, 18, 19, around this point where I started feeling like nothing excites me anymore because I have heard everything now. Like it's nothing excites me anymore. It's boring. I need desperately I need something really new, some really fresh item to keep myself going. And exactly during those same time, this album came into my life, and this was such a fresh thing that I was experiencing in my life. I was very happy, and since last few years, this album has been in constant in my playlists when I'm in the mood to listen to some comparatively chill music. Yeah.
They
I
relate
think
to a lot of stuff. I'm sorry, someone's going.
no, I was saying that I think you touched upon it, Bikram, as well. Is it even black metal? So for me, the comparison I can make for this album, and you have your very valid points about it being black metal, but for me, the comparison I can make about Ved Buens Ende is with a band called Swans.
Yeah,
If anyone's
Swans is
familiar
weird
with
as
their
fuck.
music,
Oh yeah, to
Swans
be kind.
is
Hmm.
yeah, Swans is a band which comes very close to, or rather, they perfected what Ved Buens Ende is doing, or what, or did. They just had one album, and also a lot of stuff which Blue Dust Nod went on to do. This was laid the path for bands like Blue Dust Nod, etc., to go ahead and do it. Uh, if you look at the
It's very
first track,
futuristic. I mean, you cannot think
very
of this in
absolutely
95.
100%. Yeah, it
Yeah.
came out in '95, and these bands were doing it in the mid 2010s. You know what
I
I
mean,
mean?
I'm
Like
pretty
20
sure King
years
Crimson was
removed.
already doing that before that, but for black, you need guts to include that shit into black metal, especially in '95 when this shit was in peak.
Yeah,
People, I mean, Dodem's guard, they were literally threatened and they got into a fight in Germany just because they had changed their sound from first
yeah,
album to the second album.
yeah,
And in those times, in being in Norway, if you have the guts to include such an controversial thing in black metal, I mean, because clean vocals for me is controversial in black metal, especially during those times. People would have killed you for using clean vocals in black metal albums.
yeah.
So that way this guy had balls, man. Like, okay, I will
Yeah, I
do
mean,
whatever the
just
fuck
look
I
at the
want with black
songs. Yeah, I
metal.
mean, there's a song
He
called "I
just
Sing
got
for the
his
Swans."
primary influences into it and totally gave birth to a if not totally new thing, but certainly a fresh, approach to a
Yeah.
sound that people
Yeah.
were already listening to from the 80s. But this was for the people who are more into the grittier side of music. They still like a bit of rawness in their music, I would say. For them, it was, I think, King Crimson.
What really irritates me is when people talk about black metal from the outside and they say like, "Oh, this music has never evolved." Which this music was evolving from the day of its inception. What
That
the
see,
fuck are you talking about?
I laugh when I hear things like
Exactly.
this, because
Yeah,
this is a
yeah,
pure
and you and
ignorant
I, we've
statement.
had these conversations face to face as well. You know, when people
Yeah.
when we speak about certain situations that we found ourselves in, when people speak about or disparage this genre. Sorry, Fez, but
No, I was gonna say that I relate to it because that misconception exists for pretty much every genre. I
Every
feel the
genre.
yeah,
same
yeah,
with some.
Mm.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and I
So
learned
because you
to.
look at songs like "I Sang for the Swans," you look at songs like "It's Magic," you look at songs like "Coiled in Winds," where they have like Gregorian chants and
Bro,
shit, dude. I mean, that's like
that
some
that Swan song
insane,
is the most craziest one. That song is the one which gives me the most chills in the entire
yeah, like
album.
"Carrier in Wounds," fucking "Autumn Leaves," "Remembrance of Things." These are like
These
some
are killer
insane,
shit.
insane tracks, and it just goes to show like how deep entrenched into the the musical setup or the way people compose music today, how influential these guys were because they did this like 30 years ago. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I relate to music, like you mentioned, it puts you in situations and you imagine stuff. So whatever you said about written waters is exactly how I feel it. Okay, it's exactly how I imagine it, walking through ruins of a war-torn city and stuff. But I do it in slow motion and in black and white. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's how
like a
I
noir sort of setting, like a
yeah,
noir
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of setting.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's how I imagine it. And for me, like you mentioned, there's no particular song structure to any of the songs, right? So for me, it's like a
Nothing like that. Yeah.
narration. Okay. Like it's like someone is
Yep.
narrating a situation, and then there are parts where the aggression is kind of coming
Even
out.
the lyrics are like that, very poetic
Yeah, yeah,
lyrics.
yes, yes. So
Yeah.
exactly, this is how I feel about that. And then, like you mentioned, that there was a point when you had reached, like you had a stagnation point when nothing appealed to you.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this had happened, okay, about 10, 15 years ago, and that's when bands like KO Dot and Model of the Well came into picture, and then they gave me a fresh perspective. Okay, this is what I like, and that's also when I found Ved Buens Ende and Virus, Doddom's Guard,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and even the other
I was
Shining.
very delighted when I came across this band a few years back. I was like, something new finally. I was
Something
really, really
new,
happy. I
yeah.
was
And
constantly listening to this for at least 2 months.
and in all honesty, no other band has been able to replicate that sound. Okay, I mean there have
Yeah.
been bands like
Because,
Swans and all, but that particular
yeah,
sound, like maybe Morbus
I have
Crawl has
had
come
my
close to
prog
them.
phase.
Sorry.
Like I had my prog phase like during
Mm-hmm.
around 2014, 15, 16, where I used to listen to a lot of prog, like bands like Camel, Genesis, and King Crimson, and also stoner bands, also like uh, these bands, forgot the name, Samsara Blues Experiment and all this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an entire phase and stuff, but at a certain point of time, I needed something more. I wanted that prog sound of King Crimson because I love that sound. I totally, thoroughly love that sound, King Crimson stuff. And I, at certain point, I felt saturated, and I really wanted something new. And I actually was thinking, okay, like I have heard now everything, almost whatever is out there available. What now? There can nothing be as fresh as whatever I have heard till now. I mean, all everything is done and dusted. No chance of getting any fresh new shit. And then comes along this album. It was such a delight in life. In life, I was happy. No depression, no anxiety.
Like even if you look at Deathspell Omega's music, there's a lot of influence that you can
Lot,
see.
bro. Ved Buens Ende,
Like the
I can
songwriting
definitely
is
say
very
this.
similar.
Yes, Ved Buens Ende, I can definitely say major part of the. I mean, they definitely influenced bands like Bloodhouse Not, Despel Omega,
Yeah.
and what other bands? Yeah, these two bands definitely come on top of my mind when
Anyone into not into
VP's
Gnaw Their
influence.
Tongues?
Which one?
Sorry.
Who?
Gnaw Their Tongues. There's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
Northern
I've
band.
heard of
Tongues.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I know Northern Tongue.
There's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
band called
I've
Gnaw
heard of
Their
it.
Tongues, which is
Yes,
Hmm.
yes, yes.
essentially what would happen if these guys. I keep
Ha
fucking up
ha.
the
Ved
name.
Buens Ende.
Yeah,
Ha.
yeah. Ved Buens Ende guys.
Red Vincent, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty wasted at this point, so excuse me. This is my fourth fucking
That's
beer,
when you
bro.
have the best conversations.
Yeah. So anyway, this is what Ved Buens Ende would sound like if they were completely off track and they were on drugs and they had lost their minds. Uh, that's an insane band where you can have a direct correlation where it's like that meme where of Mr. Incredible, where it's that Mr. Incredible's face, and as it moves along years, it becomes like more darker. That's exactly what this band would sound like.
Okay,
I've heard a
yeah.
few
Another band
songs.
which comes to my mind is have you guys heard of this death metal band called Dodaka Hedron?
Oh, of course.
Dodeca,
Yeah,
yeah,
Dodecahedron.
Dodecahedron,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Even they have a lot of VB influence.
Quintessence, yeah, that album.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely, they have a lot of VB influence. I mean, it's a very quintessential album
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
90s. That I mean, I have no idea why the fuck I was under the rock and never heard this album all my life.
Even
It's
Morbus
been a
Crohn is
couple of
very similar
years.
when it comes to, Morbus Crohn is also, I mean, I think Morbus Crohn, Sveven, it's stylistically very similar to Ved Buens. And I mean, of course, not
Mhm.
extremely similar, but the songwriting kind of seems to draw influences from Ved Buens. And
Yep,
I would
yep,
draw
definitely.
their approach to, okay, their approach was a little similar to what Atheist or Tiamat did on Wild Honey, wanting to break out of the norms and go into a very different area of songwriting altogether. Gorguts, for example. Great album. So, again, one of the things that you guys have covered pretty much everything, but one thing that they also did, which is heard on Cynic Focus, is using vocal effects on clean vocals. Right? Vocoder and all of that. Great album.